I'm going to turn it over to the two Jeremys. This is World Disability Matters podcast, and I'm going to turn it over to the two of you, Jeremy. Whichever Jeremy, I guess Jeremy Opperman, you're going to start the show.
Yeah, and if we could just ask our friends in the room, other than Louise and Jeremy, if they could mute themselves, and then we'll open it up just now.
Okay, it's all yours.
And welcome again to another episode of World Disability Matters. And I am Jeremy Opperman. I am coming in from Cape Town, South Africa. And my co-host, another Jeremy, is Jeremy Warner. Jeremy, you want to say something and introduce yourself?
Greetings. I am joining you from Indianapolis, Indiana in the United States. I am myself a bilateral above knee amputee and a burn survivor, and simply thrilled to continue the conversation about how our culture of people with disabilities around the world needs to connect. So, and welcome, Louise. I just also want to throw out to the audience, if anybody has questions as we go, please just put them into the chat and we will work them in when we can.
Yeah, that's great. And also greetings, Louise, and welcome again. Just to mention as well, I forgot to mention, I am also a person with a disability. I'm blind. So if you're making funny faces at me in this podcast, you're wasting your time. And so let's kick off straight away. We want to keep this fairly short, and then we're going to open it up to the floor. And so today we have Louise from Brazil. Louise, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about, very briefly, about why you're so interested in disability advocacy and what you've done? You've done some really interesting technical things.
Okay, hello everybody. Thank you very much, Jeremy O and Jeremy W. Yeah, to be here with you all, guys. And my name is Louise Mausch. I came from Brazil. Actually, I am in Brazil right now because we are online. And I started to work. I don't have any disability. I don't have anyone in my family with disability. So I'm here and I'm working the almost last 20 years in this field because I became passionate about what we can do with this area in persons with disability. Actually, my story starts, my older sister, she used to work with disability yet. She was teacher. And then I moved on from other city. I came to meet her here in São Paulo, and we started to create a no-profit organization, and it's called Mais Diferenças, and it's more differences. And since there, we realized that we had a lot of things to do, and advocacy, it was one of the main things, because otherwise we cannot reach the society, we cannot reach the governments, and we cannot actually promote a change, because advocacy was the way we understand that we could put everybody together, thinking and fighting for the same rights or from the same reasons. Instead, that sometimes I always say that we have different kinds of advocacy. I really work with inclusion. I really believe that everybody needs to be together in their whole life, especially in educational, because I didn't have this opportunity when I was studying. I didn't have opportunity to become really close from persons with disabilities. So my first contact will be when I was like already an adult. And then I started to look at my friends and to look at all these guys and see how they struggling in their regular base life, how difficult they have, a lot of barriers they get. So, and then we started to make I think this first advocacy that, okay, if I am in a restaurant, I can talk with this guy because we need a bathroom, we need ramps, we need a bigger table. And then we started to go, and after that, I think this spirit has grown a lot. And then just to have a short, because this is a problem, Jeremy, I speak a lot, so please interrupt. And then I get really close from some friends at the same generation. Right now I have 43 years old, but like in 15 years ago, we started to make some manifestations at street, some marches. So we used to call superação movement. It was Movimento Superação, superation. During that time, it was a good word. Right now, we still don't know about that, because sometimes person with disability, they don't want to be really close about only superation and being heroes, all that stuff. But during that time, it was important. And we have marched with young guys with all kind of disability and with no disability. And we are promoting at streets. And our lem was the first was we are at streets because sidewalks, they are not accessible. So we became in Avenida Paulista, is the most important, one of the most important avenues in Brazil. And it represents the economy in São Paulo, that is our biggest state and the richest state in Brazil. So we were like, okay, we are here at the most important avenue with rich banks and all that stuff. And persons with disability, they still need to be at streets because they're not welcome, or they cannot reach the sidewalks because it's not accessible. And then we started this movement. And after that, we reached like almost 20 marches in 6 different cities, in Rio de Janeiro, in Porto Alegre, and we also did in Argentina. So we started like this network also. And each year we have one issue that we wanted to complain about. So first was like accessibility, physical, after that education. When we started some, and also this march, behind this march was a lot of working in different groups and trying to establish different kind of laws, legislations, working with the UN Convention. So a lot of things we try to do, and we are still doing that, because advocacy, it's a process that never ends.
Let me jump in there. I'm fascinated, actually. I got to tell you, you appear to have those marches. Were they very large? How many people would you typically get in marches like that?
Sometimes you get like 5,000 people. Ones that we have. Yeah.
No, I'm fascinated by this, because in my country we couldn't get 5,000 people in a million years. Okay, admittedly, you're 3 times our population, but the point I'm making here is that, do you get a lot of cooperation from the NGO sector, the disability-related NGO sector, what we would call disability sector in this country? Was there a lot of cooperation in working with this? Did they work together?
Yes, in this march, the head of this march was 2 NGOs. One was mine, Mais Diferenças, and another one was Movimento Superação, they are named. And we work a lot with different organizations as well, but we also work close with the government as well. For example, we were one of the only that have the authorization to go to the streets. So we talk with the mayor, city, we talk with the traffic department, and we have this also. For example, we had one year that we believe that was the biggest moment we got. The mayor and the city, they actually, we invite some artists, some famous artists, and we did a big gig with big shows with famous artists, and the mayor pay all the infrastructure. And during this time, we received the presence of the mayor by himself, and also the governor from São Paulo state, and also secretariats from divisions of disability and stuff. So what we was trying to do is like to push with the civil society, but also the government, because sometimes when government are in front of their citizen and they are talking about disability and how beautiful this is, they can have at least, how could I say, at least a minimum of compromise with them, you know? Because, you know, politicians, they like big audience. They like speeches.
Sure.
And then this was some moments that we could have them in our side as well.
Amazing. Let me hand it over to my co-host here. Jeremy, do you have a question?
Well,
Louise?
I do, because Luis, you mentioned something that I think was really important as you were talking, which was that these marches were not just people with disabilities, these were also people without disabilities. And we were talking earlier about how, before the show began, about how do we ever get to a point where people with disabilities really are in mainstream? And it really takes being in community. How did you manage to build that there? And it sounds like before you guys got into these, started doing these marches, that Brazil was not there. And so I'd like to also kind of hear more about how that's been, how you got the 5,000 or more people together for these marches, and then how it's been embraced as you've moved forward.
Yeah, I think, for example, what we live here in Brazil in the last years, it was like a big movement, you know. The march was part of that, but we have also a lot of persons with disability really fighting with their rights, you know. So we have different ONGs, we have civil society organization. So we are really strong right now in this, talking about that. And we also have the government during some times that was creating some legislation, was creating some public policies. So it was like an environment that was, how could I say, that was good for inclusion. And right now, I think we are getting even better because we are talking about ableism a lot. And everything just started, in my vision, when Brazil had a law that obliged big companies to hire persons with disabilities. So what happened is that we take persons out of their home, out of their own situations or their own specialized system or organizations, and you bring them to society, and you bring them through the work. So actually they started to earn money, they started to have, so people like me that didn't have the opportunity to live during the school, you started to have opportunity to meet them at the job. So I was the most important thing, is to create community and to create this proximity as well.
Louise, I've got a question, and I'm
okay.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I'm mindful of time. Now, I heard you about and we have a similar thing here about employment for persons with disabilities, but it's not backed up by any kind of, what's the word, broad-based legislation such as the ADA or the British DDA. Does Brazil actually have disability-specific legislation?
Yes, we have. Since 2016, we have what we call LBI, is that Brazilian Inclusion Law. If I
Excellent.
Okay. It happens, for example, this is another thing of advocacy. In Brazil, we have two texts for different legislation. One that we call, like here in Brazil, it's really common. We have like a, how can I say that, a state law. For example, we have for the children, for the elderly, and they're starting to have it for disability as well. So in this case, we were, and during this process, the UN Convention came. So one thing that we really work close is to understand the difference between these two legislation. One, it was not really modern, what we call Estatuto da Pessoa com Deficiência, and the other LBI, it was really important because it was like a process through the UN Convention. So we keep almost 10 years fighting and saying for the legislator that, look, this law, the Estatuto, it's not like a social model. It's more based in a medical model because it's a legislation. No? So after that, and it was something really important here in Brazil right now, we had a member of the Senate during that process. She was a deputy in the Congress and she's a tetraplegic. And this woman is really working hard and during his political process to become and get different kind of legislation and important legislation as well. So what we believe here in Brazil, we have these things that we have a good legislation. We have a civil society from organizations of persons with disability really strong. We know how we are. Sometimes one are fighting for one kind of group or one issue, another for another kind of group, another issue. For sure, we are not that united, but we are close. We work in networks. We participate in different kind of networks. So I think that's what is happening in Brazil right now, because we have a strong legislation, we have a civil society looking for their rights and fighting. We have the whole society understanding that inclusion and accessibility is fundamental rights for everybody. And we also had right now in big companies the movement of ESGs and SDGs as well. So I think we have this environment, yeah. But part of that is really important, that because right now, for example, we understand that legislation, it's always changing. You know, you need to be really aware. For example, we have a really good legislation and public policy in inclusive education. Right now, we are losing some things. Another thing that sometimes happen in Germany, just to have an idea what we were talking before about abuse, sometimes person that they really don't have a disability. I'm not going to say that because it's not easy to say something about that. But the rights and the legislation, they made for everybody, yeah, with any kind of disability. But sometimes some guys, they really struggling. Oh, I want to use this parking. I want to have my assistant dog, or I want to buy, for example, here in Brazil, we can buy cars with a discount of taxes if you got any disability. So some persons, they say, no, look, I have a disability, but we are not actually like that. So sometimes persons also are abusing about their rights.
Sure,
and
sure.
On the other hand, it's a really important thing that we need to promote awareness to persons that understand, look, this legislation, okay, in legal terms, you can have it, but in ethical terms, you probably shouldn't have this, because otherwise we're going to have everybody wanting to get their rights for something that they really, really don't need, you know?
Right, right. I must confess, I'm really amazed at the depth with which Brazil has embraced this, and I think it's amazing that you've done so much. I've got one, and once again, time is my enemy here. But here's a question for you: has this translated? I can hear that it's translated at one level, but how well has Brazil embraced, let's say, inclusive education or dealing with children with disabilities? Is it inclusive or is it segregated?
Okay, in terms of inclusive education,
and briefly, please, Louise, briefly.
Yes. we have a inclusive system, but we also have a special system. So
sure.
The main system is that no one can have denied one inscription at a school, at a regular school, independent of their condition. So the Constitution says that everybody are welcome at schools, no matter their conditions. What really happened is
well, let me stop you there. I have to drive this quite firmly. Now, if they're allowed in, and your child's allowed into the school, we call it inclusive, who picks up who pays for the reasonable accommodation that the child will need, either with an assistant, another assistant, or technology?
Okay, that's what I was supposed to do, because the main thing is financial. Who and how they can finance this system. So we got we have two different things: the public system and the private system. Talking about public, we used to have this policy, because in Brazil we have the Ministry of Education, and the schools are in charge of the municipality and the regional government, most of them. So the Ministry of Education, they give policies and they give money. And here during some time is that children's with disability at schools, they could earn more money than another guy. So just to have an idea, if I have one student without disability, they will give 1, but if I have someone with disability, they could give 1.5, for example. So we have financial. We also had a system that is called specialized educational attendees. It was like a counter-turn system that persons with disability could come and have their other issues work with different kind of teachers specialized.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Jeremy, I think you've got a thought.
I do. So my background is in the hospitality industry. So Louise, I'm curious to know from the tourism standpoint, if how the public sector has embraced accessibility, and if somebody like myself wanted to come to Brazil, how would I know what to expect when I come there, from, you know, the ability to move around in a wheelchair in public, or with prosthetics, or, you know, transportation, simply to be able to get around?
Yeah, good question, Jeremy, because, for example, this is a huge, how can I say, this is a huge barrier in Brazil. We are not accessible country in terms of physical accessibility, because we just started this like at the most 20 years ago. Really different from Europe, from US, that started the accessibility in conditions much earlier, for example. So here, what happened, and we are a controversial country. Our culture is like that, and this came through disability field as well. But just to have an idea, talking about tourism, I met some friend last week. She runs a company. She's CEO of a company that works with persons with disability, and she's wheelchair user. And she told me, Louise, I'm not sure if I'm gonna put this at the Facebook, Instagram, but last week I need to be carried through an airplane. And persons in the airplane understand that it was something good that they are carrying me, because they really care me, and they were carrying me. And right now, and after that, I see she put this in the net. So that's what happened. For example, the airplane companies, they don't give the seat, the reserved seat. They sometimes want to carry. I had a lot of situations traveling with my friends with disability. They were not really good attendants, you know. At the same time, in some hotels, it's sometimes you don't have accessible hotels, you don't have accessible restaurants, you don't have the sidewalks, you don't have the ramps. So it is really different situation. This is a country that you're not gonna find a standard. You're gonna find something something in movement, something getting better, but you don't have the secure and the autonomy to say, okay, let's go to Brazil, make some tourism, and I'm sure that I want to know each city I want, or I'm sure that I can visit each tourist point that I want. This is not going to happen, because it's like a process that we are facing. Yeah, we have some cities that are more accessible. We have some places that are more accessible, but this doubt, it's gonna come with you when you want to come to visit us, you know.
Well, and that's always a fear, no matter where you're traveling or what disability you have, because even in the United States with the ADA, which wasn't signed on into law until 1990, there's still implementation in the public sector is very different from it just simply being written on a piece of paper. And it really is about us living in the community and demanding that right to access, you know, our environments.
So I've got one question. I've got another question, which is unfortunately, we got to lead towards the end here, because I want to build in time for our guests, or rather our listeners, to participate in, and I want to give them as much time as possible. But you have seen progress in the 20 odd years where there's been significant progress, you think? I mean, sorry, I'm praising this badly. Do you think it's enough? Do you think there's a lot more that can be done, Louise?
Yeah, for sure, Jeremy. I've seen a lot of progress. There's things that I couldn't imagine that I could, in 20 years, you know, participate and seeing. But for sure, we need a lot of much more things to do. Just to have an example, education is still a big issue, really, really big issue, because in the end, we have a legislation, we have the teacher, but in the end, what really persons are facing, you know? But and this is something that I'm concerned about when we talk, when accessibility, when inclusion, when disability became like a fashion. Sometimes this could be really good because this is a really good opportunity that we can embrace and bring awareness for community. But at the same time, sometimes it looks like it's done because we talk a lot of, we are always talking about that. So sometimes it looks like, okay, it's done, it's good enough. And it's not it's good enough, you know, it's always a process. Okay, if we
interesting.
Give like wheelchairs for everybody, okay, right now we can have like a motorized wheelchair. Okay, right now we can have like a wheelchair that could upstairs. Okay, right now we could have like a flying wheelchair. Yeah, you know, it's like a process. And
I want the flying wheelchair.
Sorry?
Yeah, I'll bet you do. So the bottom line is what you're saying is that you can't stop the pressure of the advocacy just because it's becoming a little better. We have in English, we have a saying, it's called resting on your laurels, but there's another word I was thinking. There was another phrase where you become complacent. That's the word. You become complacent, which means somebody might think, you know what, we've done quite a lot now. I don't think we need to do much more. So to stop that from happening, you're suggesting, I'm assuming, that you can't stop the pressure of advocacy.
No, you can't stop, because when you stop, things go back for, you know,
backwards. Yes. And you haven't seen that, have you? You haven't seen any examples of things going backwards?
Yes, I've seen a lot. For example, we did one thing that I was really part of that when we started to understand that cinemas and movies should be more accessible. So in 2014, we did, and I participated, we did the first accessible sessions, inclusive session in cinemas here in Brazil. And we started to work with the national agency, with persons with disability community, that in 2019, we should have all cinemas accessible for everybody. Right now, we are in 2022, and it doesn't happen. It doesn't happen because each year, the president or someone say, okay, let's postpone for 1 year more. Let's postpone for 1 year more. And because we have the pressure of the cinemas, for example, theaters and companies, and also the major companies for their content. So everybody, when they have opportunity, they postpone something. The same thing happened with television and accessible content here in television. No, let's 1 year more. It's difficult, it's hard, it's expensive. So let's give them 1 year more. The same with physical and architectural accessibility. So people, when they have opportunity, and sometimes they did this at the midnight, you know, when no one are looking at, and our Congress, sometimes they did this, they vote something that take a lot of rights. It just almost happened with this law about inclusion in employees. So they were almost getting there, and then people say, look what they are doing, let's put together and let's put strength together, and then they change their view about the legislation. So well, all the time, aware.
No, well, you know, I guess that's always going to be the problem, where, you know, the people in legislative power are only human, and unfortunately, that this is going to be a trouble. Always, I suspect, where people will backslide. And so clearly the pressure needs to be built up. I'm still absolutely fascinated by the idea of 5,000 people marching. I mean, we can certainly generate 5,000 people marching here about issues, but never about a disability issue, not in my experience. And so I have to commend you, and I think you are very important. You're a very humble man, but I think you're very important in the evolution of Brazilian embracing disability inclusion. I suspect you've made a big difference yourself. The one thing I'm sad about is that we never got to talk about the work you do technically. I know you're passionate about audio description, for instance, and You've had several years. I wonder if I can give you, and I really mean it, hey, if I say 5 minutes about some of the technical innovation that you have come up with, you and your sister and your company have come up with, that you're very proud of.
Okay, I'll try in 5 minutes, Jerry. But for example, here in Brazil, talking about March, we did the first accessible truck here in Brazil. We have like big trucks that persons come up. We did this in the gay parade. We not only participate in March, but we participate in the gay parade. It was the first accessible truck that person with disability could come in gay parade. This was in 2005. And everybody asked, but why? So because they have the right to decide what they want to, what kind of they want to do and where they want to be, you know?
Yeah. Gay people can be disabled too.
Yeah. We did here in Brazil the first easy lecture book, and it was the Little Prince. We create here also what we call a multiple accessible book, multiple format accessible book with audio description, easy lecture, sign language, Braille. We have like more than 12 different formats of this book that could, and we call like universal book. And for this year, we reached like the Zero Project awardee for this situation. And we've been finalists of one of the most important literacy prize here in Brazil. We did the first accessible, cinema sessions, inclusive, with audio description, sign language, and also captioning in the mainstream theaters. We did the first transmission of a Paralympic ceremony opening. We did it twice.
I remember that. Yeah, I was on the phone with you and you were telling me about it.
Yeah, we did it with Be Played. It is a new technology that we create that we transmit in real time, audio description, sign language, and also subtitle. And we did this with we did the first transmission of a show with sign language here in Brazil. So we did a lot of different things, you know. I don't like to talk about this, you know, sometimes, because it looks like we are working alone, but we are not working alone. We are working with a lot of persons and a lot of persons with disability as well. And for me, for example, this is like I really like to invent things and do different things, you know, and create technologies and look how we can scale up, how we can down prices, and it's what it's my chick. Yeah, I don't know how can I say that.
It's your passion, I think, is probably the closest word to that.
When that mosquito gets you.
I want to say I wish Zoom would allow us to applaud, but it doesn't really, this isn't the medium to applaud, but if I could, I would applaud. And I think you've done extraordinarily. And I'm proud to say I'm your friend and know you, because you've done such extraordinary work. And thank you so much for sharing the perspective from Brazil. I'm now very pleased that we did it this way. The next time we'll talk to Nalish and we'll get an Indian perspective. So I'm actually pleased that this ended up in this particular way. Jeremy, do you want to say anything more before we open it up to our floor?
I do. I just want to point out that, you know, and to your point, Jeremy, of the need to keep the pressure on, but Louise, the work that you've done, the work that you are continuing to do, it is opening the world to people with disabilities. And as they realize greater independence, that then is going to innovate the need for even more modification and adaptability and accessibility. And just thank you so much for joining us today and sharing so much. I look forward to hearing what other people who've been listening in would like to know.
All right. So on that note, if you can put your hands up, or perhaps post a question in chat. But if you want to have an audio conversation with Louise, then put your hand up. Let Ken recognize you, and we have got only about 20 minutes max. So I'll be quite tough on you. So go for it. Anybody? Ken, are there any hands?
Not yet, but I certainly have a question, and it's something I constantly struggle with, and that is the power of one person. What is the power of one person when it comes to advocacy? I always feel like I need 5,000 people behind me, but do you need that much, or can one person do something?
No, we don't need 5,000 behind us, yeah? We just need to start, and I think one of the most important thing in advocacy, it's like this, like I told you in the beginning, okay, if I'm in a restaurant, I can say, look, if you don't have a bathroom, accessible bathroom, you should have. If you don't have a ramp, you should have. But if you have, because here what sometimes happen, if you have accessible bathroom, don't close them, don't make like a storage, because sometimes person use bathroom like storage. No one use this. It's just for someone with disability. So I think that we need, each person can do something different, can create pressure, can make some choices when they are buying things. These things, this company, she is an inclusive company. She's an accessible company. So am I gonna put my money in this company that are accessible, or if it's not doing right things? So everybody has this power, you know, through what we can create awareness for another, what we can use our money through it, you know. I've always believed that.
And Alan has a question. Alan, could you identify yourself and then ask your question, please?
Yeah, no, my name is Al Perks. I'm from Ottawa, Canada. I've been involved. I have a family member that is disabled and uses a wheelchair, a powered wheelchair. And I'm on the Canadian Society for Civil Engineering's Accessibility Task Force. And I'd only add that I really I'm encouraged by what I'm hearing from those people that have been speaking. And I would only add that I've come to the conclusion that my best efforts are to take individual situations and try to make them a little better in terms of accessibility. And the one thing I've learned from a kind of a builder's point of view is that most design manuals are 200 to 300 pages. And that implies you have to do everything perfectly all at once. And the strategy in Ottawa I've seen work a number of times is do the basics first. If you can't get in the house or the office and comfortably maneuver, very little else matters in terms of switches and levels and whatnot. So I've been focusing on the basic first principles of accessibility, and that's get something done on all new buildings such that later they can be easily and inexpensively adapted for full accessibility. So that's all. Just a comment, because I really enjoyed listening to the others speak.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. And Louise is here. And Louise, could you identify yourself and then make your comment, please? I'm not sure if your audio was working, Louise.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I'm Nilesh Singhit from Bombay, India. I'm a person with disability, cerebral palsy, and also I'm an activist. Coming back to the question, Ken raised, is one person good enough? Or do we need 5,000 people? My approach has always been that disability is just not my issue. It is, an issue of the society. I'll give you an example. A few years back, when I was traveling from Bombay to Delhi, at that time, there was this huge thing that people with disability had to sign that indemnity form saying that whatever happens, the airlines are not responsible and we would not get any insurance or anything. So we were kind of, protesting against that. And I refused to sign the indemnity form. So, and I boarded the plane, and there was some call from, the thing saying that, this person needs to be deplaned. And the security people came and they were on the verge of deplaning me. I refused to kind of, budge from my seat. And then with great difficulty, I stood up. And then I asked all the fellow passengers saying that this is what the airlines is doing. And do you think if if the airlines is right, I will deplane now without causing any problem to anybody because the flight was already delayed. And if they think that I am right, then please help me out, because this is not just my problem. It can happen to anybody. And you will not believe me, half of the plane stood up saying that if you deplane this disabled person, we will also all get down. And the plane was halted for like nearly 40 minutes. And finally they let us go. So I think it is how we kind of ask people for help. And I believe that if we are logical and if people feel that what we are asking is doable and it's morally right, I think people will support us, come what may. So that has always been my approach. Whenever I face any problem in places like that for accessibility and all, I always ask for people's help. Just help me out here, because this is not just my problem. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you. And I'd like to make a comment. Like, that was such a great story. I love that kind of story. I did a similar thing once in a restaurant when they tried to throw me out with my guide dog. And I was really deep into the restaurant. And the guy said, you got to go, you got to go. And I said, no. And so I climbed up on the table and I whistled very loudly to catch their attention, because it's actually a pub. It was more of a bar and a restaurant, and they're very noisy, and they all stopped talking. And I said exactly what you did. I said, they want me to leave with my guide dog. Is anybody worried about my guide dog? And everybody stood up and said, let him be. What's wrong with you guys? Of course he can come in. And it was great to see. So if you can harness the people like you did, Milish, and I suppose I did to the extent in that restaurant, it's very gratifying to see what happens from that. And Louise, I'm sure you have examples like that as well.
Yeah, I don't have any disability, but I've lived this with some friends and some close friends, some situation about that. And I think this is really important. And especially right now, for example, when we have like the media, social media, and everybody could do their message. And here we are looking like, here in Brazil, we had a lot of persons that became like YouTubers, like influencers. And they are doing an excellent job, because they are showing how this could be easy, what we can talk, what we can do when meet someone with disability, what is ableism, what is not, what kind of things that we need to change in our language, how we speak, how we doing jokes and all that kind of thing. So I think this is really, really important thing when we empower each other to give their message, And right now we need to use the arms that we got, the weapons that we got, like the social media and all that stuff as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have one more question. Mona has a question. If you could identify yourself, Mona, and then ask your question or make a comment.
Hello, I'm Mona Arsenault from Montreal, Quebec, and I'm also on the Canadian Accessibility Standards Committee here in Montreal. I had polio as a young child, and now I use an electric wheelchair since about 1984. And my story is about the Montreal metro or subway system. When finally, after 30 years of having a subway system here in Montreal, they put some elevators in, and I was one of the first people to use the elevator. And to use the elevator, I needed to have a manager of the metro system come with me and assist me to go onto the train from the platform onto the train, because at different times there was a 6-inch gap. And this was, I eventually found out, because of the hydraulic system. It wasn't well enough adapted. When people with walking had no problem, they would trip, but they got onto the car. Whereas with my electric wheelchair, it was a hazard. I did not want to break my wheelchair. So they adapted that by having a manager. Eventually, they changed the metro cars to have new metro cars that had proper hydraulic system to go up and down. Now, after all this time, I am able to go into the metro system to the 8 or 10 different metro stations here in Montreal on my own without assistance, and it's quite a difference. I did this, I kept asking for it, and you can do it yourself. I have done it all across Montreal and the province of Quebec. We do not have fully accessible restaurants, hotels, even our hospitals are not fully accessible. And when you think of a hospital that's not fully accessible, how can that be? But a brand new hospital that is built had only 3 washrooms in a hospital that covers a full city block. It can be changed. We have to change it. And that's what I have done ever since 1951, when I first had polio, until today, 2022. And I always like to fight for it. And it's a wonderful feeling to accomplish something. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mona.
Thank you, Mona. Well, David has a question. Jeremy, we have time for one more question, I think.
Oh, yeah.
One more. Yes, one
David,
more.
David, could you identify yourself and then make your comment?
Yeah, David Talbot, founder of Crutches for Africa, Denver, Colorado, and also a Paul Harris Fellow. Mona, I have to reflect too that when I was in Montreal for the convention, that the only way that you could get from the street level down to the train, of course, you had to descend the stairs. There was no elevator at street level, but you could go down the stairs, and then there was a handicap elevator at the bottom of a long flight of stairs. You know, and it's these kind of issues that are just so remarkable to us. Another example, in Kisumu, Kenya, the disability office of the government there is on the 8th floor. Now they have an elevator, but they have a guard that won't let any disabled people get on the elevator because they're all So these are the kind of issues that we see over and over. And when I'm traveling this way, I get really noisy. So I appreciate standing on the table. Jeremy, that was you, I think, in South Africa.
Yeah.
Isn't it with your, yeah. So, you know, all of these kind of things, the more noise we make, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. But again, if we can get beyond that, and one of the things that was changing in Kisumu was that the governor's wife was with us, and she was absolutely appalled when she realized what the situation was for access to that 8th floor office, because her husband had had hip replacement surgery that went awry and subsequently was in a wheelchair for several months. And so she had firsthand knowledge. So when I go out on distribution, I work really hard to get the able-bodied people on a pair of crutches for a minimum. I always push for a day. But if I can get them on and take them into the market on a pair of crutches, or we tried to take somebody through one of the markets in a wheelchair, and they saw what a circus this is, but when they have that firsthand experience, that's when it starts to make a change.
That's right. That's absolutely right. It's very often something of a Damascus experience, if I can use a biblical analogy, and very often when you have them encountering a disability for themselves, like they break both legs or they've had a hip replacement, and they suddenly realize the extent of inaccessibility, they can often be your best advocates. Or to use another example, you know, the issue around, I'd love to have a chat one day to you guys about accessible parking bays and other people who use them and they shouldn't. But the people who get the most angry are the partners of the persons with the disabilities, the girlfriends, the husbands, the wives, the children. And so that's really what we need to generate, really. Ken, I think we can actually entertain another question. If anyone has another
Jacqueline
one.
Jacqueline has her hand up. Jacqueline, could you identify yourself and then make your comment, please?
Yeah, my name is Jacqueline Wilson. I'm a physician here in Egypt. thank you for your kind invitation. I'm really fascinated with the long experience of Louise, and I think that the facilities are completely different in Brazil and Egypt. Now, after attending many sessions of your group, I understand that the problem is very complicated. We have here treatment, rehabilitation, education, devices, employment, social protection, transforming the way of thinking of disabled persons. So I search for a starting point here, like the question of Mr. President, how can we start? I think that one of the main goals of this group is to set like a curriculum, like a game, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, advanced phase. Yeah, just a roadmap to show us, because by this way we can focus in just one area to achieve in our developing countries, because here the needs are totally different. We have many aspects of the problem. This is my question. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacqueline. And you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right.
Diana has a question. Diana, or has her hand up. Diana, could you identify yourself and just make a comment? Whatever comment.
Well, it's so good to see you all today. My name is Diana Nesterov. I'm my home club, my Rotary home club is Acton Boxborough here in Massachusetts, United States, and I'm the immediate past district governor of the great district of 7910, which is central Massachusetts. And I really want to thank Jeremy O and Jeremy W for leading the podcast today. And thank you so much, Louise, for sharing with us your fascinating story and your achievements. And to all of you with your questions. And I really want to make a comment. I think when President Ken asked the question, can just one person start this whole educating? I'm a true believer in education, educating other people about the world of disability. I think President Ken knows the answer of that question, because it is how it started in our district back in during the summer of 2020. One member of one of our clubs, Bill Paulson, approached me and said, well, we have to start a DI committee. So we started it, and it started with one person, and that's how everything in Rotary starts. In Rotary, everything starts with one person. And I believe that everything in life starts with one person. And once you have the passion and the drive, you will find followers. And we are a true example of that, because when it all started with one person for our DI committee, then Ken Masson was part of the DI committee, and he decided that we need to do more work and educate people and advocate for people with disabilities. And he started the movement. And I would call it the movement because now in this disability advisory group, we have more than 500-600 people that follow us. And out of that, we even started a Rotary Club, the World Disability Advocacy Club. And let me tell you something, I really want to share that with you. I've shared it with some of you before. During my travels this past summer, I was in Europe, I was in Germany and France, and I shared with some of the Rotarians there. I'm originally from Bulgaria, so I was in Bulgaria too. I shared your experience with Bulgarian Rotarians, and guess what? I was just confirmed that they started a committee, like a group in Bulgaria, for people and especially for kids with hearing impairment. And in France and in Germany, they started other committees that are focused on people with disabilities. So it grows. That's all it takes. One person, one idea. Just keep going with your imagination, the flexibility, the creativity, the hard work that connects the world. Open opportunities and serve to change lives, like we do in Rotary.
Thank you.
Well,
Thank you. That was beautiful.
You couldn't ask
Yeah.
for a better closure statement
Yeah.
than that, Diana. And your role, by the way, has been significant. I've noticed right from the beginning, because I was there with Ken almost at the beginning. And so, well done. That was terrific. That was terrific. And as I remember saying once, it's unlikely that disability is going to change Rotary, but there is every likelihood that Rotary could change the face of disability in the world. And I honestly believe that. And so on that note, I want to thank all of you for attending. This was a most special edition, being live with people. I think, Ken, we need to do this more often. And one last thank you very much from myself, Jeremy Opperman in Cape Town, South Africa, and my co-host.
Thank you very much.
And that's it. We'll see you through the window. And that's enough. That's a wrap from World Disability Matters. Thank you very much.